These documents are only a tiny selection from a much larger national evidence archive obtained by the Heritage Party and by residents across the country. A small selection has already been submitted to the House of Lords for debates that are now shaping the structure of local government, decisions that affect our present and the future generations. The wider archive has also been provided to the National Audit Office and other oversight routes, because what these documents expose is not a minor dispute. They reveal a blatant breach of democracy. Significant structural changes are being pushed through, but the key element is missing: real consent from the public, backed by solid evidence of genuine consultation, clear decisions, and a lawful process. This is why this is called a forensic audit. It is not opinion. It is the paper trail. In Gloucestershire, Ref. 38111588-, as in other councils, the council admits that the decision to postpone local elections was made by the cabinet alone, with no full council vote and zero public consultation. Most staggering is the admission that no legal advice was sought to verify if such a postponement was even lawful under current legislation. The council attempts to deflect accountability, stating the decision was taken by the government, yet they confirm they formally requested the postponement themselves. The pattern repeats in Leicestershire Ref. FOI 8784. The council confirms they formally requested a postponement despite receiving no ministerial orders or legal instruction to do so. Taken together, these records point to a national pattern of executive overreach and procedural shortcutting. Actions affecting the ordinary electoral cycle are being advanced through cabinet/ministerial routes and informal request mechanisms, with democratic testing displaced into after-the-fact FOI disclosure, rather than being addressed through clear member mandate, meaningful consultation, and transparent recorded legal footing under the relevant statutes, including the Local Government Act 2000. This is governance by informal arrangement, with accountability blurred between council choice and government instrument. 1. Forensic audit. The Heritage Party Challenge. Subject: formal correspondence to Minister Jim McMahon, OBEMP. This is where the paper trail stops being politics and starts being a constitutional problem. On April 2, 2025, the Heritage Party put a formal challenge to Minister Jim McMahon. The target is simple: the government's decision to use the Local Government Act 2000 as the route to interfere with the ordinary electoral cycle. Here's the key point. A statute may give a power, but that does not automatically make its use appropriate, proportionate, or democratically legitimate for mass postponements tied to a policy programme. This letter forces the minister to answer the question the public never got to vote on. What is the hard evidence of necessity, and where is the democratic mandate? Because when elections are delayed, the result is obvious. You extend executive control while the electorate is locked out of the normal renewal of mandate. Call it what it is: a pause on democratic accountability, justified through a statutory route that is now being stretched to cover a national restructuring agenda. That is why this letter matters. It nails the government to a single point: show the necessity, show the mandate, or admit you are using law as a workaround for consent. Forensic audit. The MHCLG admissions subject: ministerial correspondence. Ref. T02024/18937. Source: MHCLG, October 25th, 2024. This letter is devastating. And it comes from the ministry itself. Dated 25th October 2024, MHCLG states the rule in plain English: ministers have no remit to intervene in the day-to-day affairs of local authorities unless an Act of Parliament specifically provides it. And it states something else that councils keep trying to dodge: local authorities are accountable to their electorate and must act within their statutory powers. Now watch the trap snap shut. Councils keep telling residents, government decided. Councils keep implying, we had no choice. But this MHCLG letter destroys that excuse. If ministers have no day-to-day remit, then councils cannot wash their hands and claim they were merely responding to ministerial preference. They own their choices, the decision route, the lack of consultation, the request letters, the spending, and the public messaging. So here's the blunt conclusion. When a council claims government made us do it, but the ministry itself says councils are independent and accountable to voters, that's not an explanation. It's an attempted escape from responsibility. And this audit is about one thing: stopping that escape. The ministerial admission, Jim McMahon letter, subject, ministerial correspondence to Magdalen, Heritage Party, reference MC2025/08645, source, Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, Jim McMahon, OBEMP, dated 31st March 2025. We now reach the centrepiece of the Lord's submission bundle, a letter from Minister Jim McMahon. This document is one of the clearest black-on-white confirmations of how the government wants the public to understand this programme. It is framed as locally initiated, not imposed by an overt national directive. In the early part of the letter, the minister refers to the decisions to postpone 9 council elections. Crucially, he describes these decisions as an assessment of each council's request. That wording matters. It confirms the trigger was not a blanket statutory instruction issued to councils. It was a process driven by councils submitting requests, and the minister deciding whether to accept them. He then justifies the route used by citing the Local Government Act 2000, and he explains that the postponements were implemented through secondary legislation under the negative procedure, meaning the instrument becomes law unless Parliament actively annuls it within the scrutiny window. This is the democratic deficit in its raw form. Elections are not being moved by a dedicated Act of Parliament debated line by line. They are being moved through secondary instruments, justified as administrative necessity and activated by council's own requests. So when a council tells residents, we had no choice, or implies this was a legal duty imposed on them, the minister's own wording undercuts that claim. They asked for it, and the government used secondary procedure to deliver it. And that is the point of this exhibit. It collapses the inevitable mandate narrative. It puts responsibility back where it belongs, on the councils that requested the postponements and on the government that enabled them through a fast legislative route without a direct public mandate. The pre-admission confirmation, Jim McMahon letter, subject, ministerial correspondence to Magdalen, Heritage Party, reference, MC2025/01269. Source, MHCLG, Jim McMahon, OBEMP, 27th January 2025. This is the quiet part, the closed doors part, put into writing. On January 27th, 2025, Minister Jim McMahon replies to the Heritage Party about councils asking to postpone their May 2025 elections. And the most important words in the entire letter are these: the ministry is acting on requests by councils. That one phrase destroys the public excuse we keep hearing locally: we had no choice. A request is not a law. A request is a decision made inside a council, and the public doesn't get a vote on it. Then the minister says your concerns will be taken into account when these important decisions are taken. That is not an automatic legal trigger. That is a discretionary process, and it happens away from the ballot box. So, here is the blunt takeaway for residents. The democratic cycle is being treated like an administrative setting. Councils ask, ministers decide, elections move, and the public is expected to accept it after the fact. This letter is the prequel to the later March admission. It shows the same mechanism: governance by request, not governance by mandate. Surrey Cabinet Paper: Transition to Unitaries before the law exists. Source: Surrey County Council Cabinet Report, Item 10, 28th of October 2025, page 65. This is the administrative machine treating reorganisation as a foregone conclusion. A Surrey County Council Cabinet Paper dated 28th of October 2025 is titled Devolution and Local Government Reorganisation Update. In the purpose of the report, it openly describes preparations for the D and LGR programme, including how the Council is preparing to implement the transition to unitary local government and how scrutiny will operate until vesting day for the new councils. The key point is what this reveals about decision culture. A Cabinet report is not Parliament. A Cabinet report does not create statutory authority, yet the language is already operational: transition, implementation, vesting day, as if the legal outcome is already settled. Then the report states the government is expected to announce its decision that month on which proposal will be implemented, and that councils will begin preparing for shadow elections and the vesting day timetable. This is how locally led becomes a psychological trick. The public is told it's consultation, but internal papers speak the language of implementation. It shows why residents keep hearing, "It's happening anyway." The institution starts acting as if the decision has already been made, and the rest becomes a managed process of compliance. Bottom line, when the paperwork starts preparing for vesting day before the public has a real mandate, the democratic sequence is reversed. Implementation first, consent later. Standard method: need by formula, settlement reality ignored. Source: MHCLG letter. Town and Country Planning Act 1990, Section 77. 5th September 2025. Walborough Barton/Newton Abbot. This is the housing machine in one page. Numbers first, evidence later. The letter is headed Town and Country Planning Act 1990, Section 77, and it is framed as an urgent ministerial intervention request. But the reply doesn't confront the settlement reality at all. It pivots straight to the standard method, a national formula introduced in 2018, and uses it as the answer. Here's the problem. The standard method produces a headline number. It does not prove local settlement level need. It does not separate an organic local population from national churn. It does not tell a town like Newton Abbot what is genuinely required on the ground. Then the letter performs the classic handoff. It says once need is assessed, local authorities should work out what can be provided, and this should be justified by evidence, land availability, flood risk, and other constraints. That is backwards. The need is asserted by formula first, then the local area is told to justify delivering it, even when the constraints scream no. The Express headline: Mass migration is future unless our falling birth rate is reversed. This is not just politics. This is the upstream driver of the whole system. Housing targets, development pressure, and then reorganisation. Falling birth rates mean the organic population is not endlessly growing, yet the planning machine keeps pushing permanent need as if growth is guaranteed. When that doesn't add up, the missing variable becomes policy-driven population change, and that becomes the justification for more housing. Now here's the link to reorganisation. Once housing numbers are inflated and treated as an emergency, councils claim they need strategic scale to deliver, bigger planning footprints, bigger infrastructure zones, bigger authorities. Development pressure becomes the excuse for structural change. So this exhibit is a warning light. When demographic reality is unstable, falling births, migration used as a lever, the housing need case becomes politically manufactured, not organically evidenced. And when need is manufactured, benefit over harm is not a conclusion. It's propaganda. Development is not a side issue. It is one of the key engines driving reorganisation. Ref FOI 2024/08392, May 17, 2024, from DLUHC team to Sean, Heritage Party. Subject: local need baselines, affordable housing applicants, 5-year residency, and 5-year employment. This is the baseline test. The simplest question the system should be able to answer if local need is real. The department is asked for 2 basic numbers. How many people applying for affordable housing have lived in England for at least 5 years, and how many have worked in England for at least 5 years? Not speculation, not ideology, just a baseline. And the official reply is devastating. This information is not held by the department. Not, we can't publish it. Not, we'll send it later. Not, it's complicated. It's simply, we don't have it, and residents are receiving the same data not held answer from councils across the UK. Data not held is not a one-off. It's a national pattern, not only on housing baselines, but across multiple so-called urgent crises, including climate emergency claims. That one line matters because it exposes the hidden fraud in the housing need narrative. Councils and ministers repeatedly talk as if need is precise and locally evidenced, as if they can tell who the housing system is actually serving and why the targets are justified. But if the department doesn't hold the residency and employment baseline, then it cannot honestly claim it has verified the local demand picture it is using to pressure settlements and override constraints. This is exactly why the standard method becomes dangerous. A generic formula produces a number, and then the system treats that number as need, even when the most basic evidence that would validate local need is officially not held. And this is not an isolated anomaly. Residents across the UK have obtained the same pattern of answers: data not held, no disaggregation, no verified baseline. Yet the developments keep coming. When the baseline isn't held, benefit over harm cannot be proven. The need is asserted first, and the evidence is missing. Ref. UK Parliament Post Note 745, May 20th, 2025. Subject: impacts of birth rate decline. Parliament's own briefing confirms birth rates are falling and the population is ageing. That doesn't mean no housing. It means the automatic permanent growth emergency narrative is not a fact. It has to be proven locally. Ref. Financial Times, ONS reporting, UK natural population set to start to decline by 2025. Subject: deaths projected to surpass births. ONS-based reporting says natural population is set to decline. Deaths surpass births. If the baseline trend is not organic growth, then the burden of proof for crisis-level need gets heavier, not lighter. Ref. TES. ONS. Reporting. 800,000 fewer children by 2032. Subject: projected pupil decline. Fewer children is an early warning signal. It directly undermines the claim that the housing pipeline is purely driven by local organic demand. Again, show the local evidence, don't assert it. Ref. Daily Express, Monday, October 30th, 2023, 22:01. Subject: headline: mass migration is future unless our falling birth rate is reversed. This is the missing lever stated openly in mainstream coverage. The headline says it plainly: mass migration is future unless our falling birth rate is reversed. It exposes why the need crisis story never ends. If settlements aren't analysed separately and the key baselines are data not held, then policy-driven immigration inflows can keep expanding demand forever. The crisis becomes permanent. By design of the system. So when ministers say need is robust and locally evidenced, the record shows two things. The key baselines are not held, and the demographic trend line is moving the other way.